do you think people misunderstand about you, if anything?
Um, Probably that I'm mean or too serious. I think.
They think you're mean. What the
I
fuck?
mean, I don't talk very much at the poker table.
Hey everybody, today I've got possibly the best tournament player out there. Word on the street is he's the best, at least from what I've heard. He's quite a bit. He's got quite a bit of a different way of doing things than me, from what I understand. I'm not one of the best tournament players, but he's also won over 54 million in tournament winnings. He's got quite a notoriety at the table and at all the trades. He's winning all the money. He's got a few secrets going on as well. I didn't know that you were a mixed game player, Steven, and you built your money. You built your bankroll off of no money at all from free rolls. So that's really interesting. So you've got a yeah. I didn't know there's a bit more of the story going on. So tell us a bit about how you got into poker and how you went from playing. I mean, it seems like you ended up finding your niche in tournaments, especially. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess that's where I ended up. I guess I've always loved games of like any kind. I grew up playing like card games, board games, video games, everything, and kind of stumbled across poker. Really enjoyed it. Um, I really loved the process of like getting better at things. So I like immediately dived into strategy and got better and found out that this was when I was 15, 16.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out there was these free rolls where you didn't have to pay any money and you could win $10 or whatever, and that was like amazing to me at the time. So yeah, I just like started playing free rolls, won a little bit of money there, and then took that to sit and goes was my first niche, I guess. Um, and just did well, built it up in sit and goes, and then kind of outgrew them, and then switched to tournaments. But I've always dabbled, like you said, in mixed games. I enjoy every game there is, basically. So yeah, I've played a bit of mixed games, way less than you, obviously. But I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy them when I get the chance to play them. But they don't come around in tournament format too often.
So, what does outgrew sit and goes? What does it mean to outgrow sit and goes? And I also let's start with that question first.
I guess I reached the highest stakes that was on the sites that I was playing, and to win for bigger prize pools, to win more money. There was more to be won in tournaments, in multi-table tournaments, and
Oh,
then of
okay.
course
So,
like live tournaments too. Just the biggest buy-ins. I always wanted to just kind of climb my way up the ladder and be playing against the best players at the biggest buy-ins. That was kind of what always motivated me. So I think that's what made me ultimately switch to multi-table tournaments.
what kind of money are we talking about? Was it easier to play sit and goes? Did things get much harder once you switched to MTTs and all of that? Was it what you expected? And also, I want to ask. Yeah, so let's start with those. I'm curious about those. And did you switch to full time MTTs? Were you making all your money from MTTs?
No, so I kind of always played both. Um, Sit and goes were easier for me when I was like in school and stuff like that because they're not such a big time commitment. And also, I was in England, so like the tournament grind, like after I finished high school and became a professional, full-time professional, my alarm would go off at like 6 p.m. for the 100 rebuy, and then I would play 6 p.m. until like the early hours of the morning. I would like watch some Poker X Factor videos or whatever and go to bed like as the sun was coming up. And
Somewhat videos.
so like one of the old training sites like Poker X Factor or Card Runners were some of
What
the
is
first
that?
ones that were around. Um, and yeah, what made me, I guess, first dabble with live tournaments was I used to play the step sit and goes on PokerStars, and
Hmm.
they had these sit and goes where you could qualify for the next level up, next level up, next level up, and then the top one was always a $2,100 step into a live tournament, um, and they were like good value sit and goes, and I wanted to play a bunch of them, so I started playing the live stops kind of out of that, and then just really fell in love with traveling as well, and meeting new people, seeing new places, new cultures, and yeah, really fell in love with that and enjoyed the tournaments and kind of switched in.
So I'm thinking to myself that there's probably tons of people out there that are sitting here wishing they could be you. They're thinking, "Wow, could I be the next Steven Chidwick, or can I win even like 10 million tournament winning? Probably settle for that. 5 million tournaments, like probably 55 million, would be a little bit tough." I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to your story, there's some kind of you're hinting at a way to kind of ascend the ladder for people for lower stakes, which is for sit and goes. And also, I'm thinking that MTTs are quite complicated in the sense that there's many different aspects to them, and that learning through sit and goes would be like a simplified version of that in the beginning and a lot more reliable than playing MTTs for a winning. So I'm kind of getting at what the process looked like for you while learning, and then finally making this transition to traveling and playing MTTs, because it's really not very easy to now just be consecutively doing this travel thing and making MTTs, especially with expenses and all of that. So can you give
Sure.
a bit more insight into what that looked like? You built up your roll to like $100,000, or started playing 5K singles, or what does that look like? I don't even know if there's equivalents today of singles.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the experience that I gained in sit and goes, because ICM is effective basically from the very start, and you play a lot of short-handed with ICM considerations. You play a lot of heads up. Um, I think like having had so many reps has really helped me um, when you get to the end stages of tournaments, because like unless you're playing the highest buy-ins, highest stakes, where the field size is much smaller, tournaments typically massive, right? You don't get to the final table very often. Most of the time, you don't cash or you min cash or whatever. You don't really get as many reps in the final table situations. Um, so it can definitely be a good tool to train that. For me, I think I mean when I first started playing sit and goes on PokerStars, I think the highest stakes were 300s, um, three and five
Really?
hundreds, and then they added 1Ks, they added 2Ks, they added 5Ks eventually, and I just kind of started playing them when they got added. And then the nice thing about playing the steps was that every live tournament I traveled to, I had a package for. So that means like room is
Oh,
comped or room is
oh
included in the
yeah.
package, and like the main event buy-in is included in the package. So it wasn't so expensive. Um, Definitely traveling around the way I do now is uh, pretty expensive, and you're right that it takes a lot. You have a lot of money to make before you are in profit if you're a live tournament grinder, I guess, if you're traveling a lot.
Well, yeah, you answered kind of the easier way to do it, and I forgot about this. I actually grind the packages a little bit too, just because I think they're a pretty good value. I think the guys that play the packages are just not like not so good, and it's like, well, if the packages are going to be a high buy-in, like why not go for it? The satellites I
Yeah, for
actually
sure.
recommend to people to play because yeah, there's major ups in satellites, and I just uh,
They're
I just
definitely
think there's no
their own thing, right?
yeah.
They
Uh,
don't really. I guess they don't translate as well as like a traditional sit and go would, because you have like this crazy bubble where like you're not even trying to win the tournament anymore. You're just trying not to bust. Um, but yeah, and the steps were really good because the lowest step was like a $3 buy-in or something, and people would work their way up and work their way up. So you would play like a 2K sit and go with people who had kind of started at $80 or $20 or whatever, and obviously they were pretty soft.
Oh, okay. Well, that's perfect. That's perfect for the aspiring uh, potential Steven Chidwicks of the future, if there are any. I don't know if it's possible to
Not sure if the
replicate.
steps are still around and alive, but
Yeah. Well, we're finding out if the steps are there. Maybe there's a few hidden pieces. Um,
mhm.
so I want to ask about these mixed games. Were you ever to create any success with that? And was there any? Do you think there's much money in all that, or was there any like method to your madness, or you're just playing for fun?
I mean, I was, I guess, mostly playing for fun. I really enjoyed playing like the Scoop and W Coop leaderboards. I really enjoyed playing the World Series and trying to like do well in all the tournaments. Basically, my method was like read, you know, split pot poker for advanced players and start high for advanced players or whatever. Like the whatever books are around, read a bit on
Oh
two
my
plus
god.
two. There weren't really many tools. Um, but I enjoy like even if I know I'm not very good, I enjoy having kind of a novel challenge and things to think about. And I think it's helpful for your just poker ability in general to just like be thinking about different concepts and what might apply to different situations in the game you are more comfortable with or whatever. But
Oh, and
it was never a big source of money for me. I kind of played the tournaments when they came around, and I played like a bit of cash here and there, kind of mostly for fun. I don't think I was ever like that good or anything.
oh, I've been my impression of you was a little bit off in some ways, just because it sounds like you're doing it so recreationally or not that seriously. But the way that you were described to me by someone else was that you do the. Tell me if this is true. That you do pretty much the exact same thing every hand that you play in a tournament poker, so that no one gets a read. So like you'll like uh, take the chips and like put them in the same way at roughly the same amount of time. Like I've never actually watched. I really should, just because I can't do this at all. I do something totally different for those live reads, and I'm just thinking, man, this guy must be like really know his shit in MTTs, and I just like imagine you to be the guy that just doesn't screw around at all and um, just knows like every single situation, and presumably is very studious. But I could be, I don't know about your study habits. Is any of that true?
So in terms of like how I act at the table, I wouldn't say I'm like super intentional about like taking exactly the same amount of time or doing things exactly the same way. I do try and like, sit with good posture and pay attention and uh, more or less do the same things. But yeah, I mean, I'm not like waiting till 25 seconds to see bet every hand or anything like that.
All right, thank God. Thank
If
God.
if there's
We
a
don't need.
situation where I'm like, you know, gonna raise the river, like yeah, I'm gonna sit there and think about it before doing it because I'm gonna need to do that with my bluffs too. But um, yeah, and then what was the other part you said? It's just my study habits. I
Yeah.
think that's actually what kind of contributed contributed a lot to my success. I think I was kind of always a mediocre-ish, decent, but like nothing special poker player. I don't think I was particularly talented. Um, and then I was one of the first adopters of Pure Solver, like the modern solvers. I played around a little
Really.
bit with Card Runners EV beforehand, but that was like pretty clunky and very time consuming and tough to use. But then I found out about PoSolver like pretty early, and I just immediately saw how much potential it had and how it was gonna kind of revolutionize the game basically. And I saw that as like, okay, this is my opportunity to be ahead of the curve and to like put all my effort into studying like the theory side of the game, because all of a sudden you had answers to questions that like you couldn't know answers to before. Like you would discuss it with people, like, oh, which hands you think it best to check back here, or like how big should I bet, or whatever. Like you would just like get to the answer by consensus or whatever. But now you have actual like answers to these questions, and I really enjoyed the process of learning through that medium. And I think that the time I devoted to that is kind of what set me on this path to where I am today, probably.
It makes a lot of sense. I had my own experience with Pile Solver too. I was probably relatively early. I will say that the trait that you mentioned to be very adaptive, or you suggested anyway, is probably much more important than some kind of like innate poker skill for all kinds of reasons. Because I mean, I think this idea of talent is quite overrated, just because it needs to be cultivated in some kind of way, and it's hard to really assess. I mean, I can say personally, there wasn't any signs that I had any talent, and really, what helped with my talent was putting myself in lots of situations and just like working through them. And then, yeah, I mean, I had a bit of a similar experience as when I started looking at Pile Solver, I realized, holy shit, this can answer. It gives so many ideas and insights really quickly, and that just no one was having, and answers a bunch of questions that like everyone was wrong about for like the longest time. Like people came to consensuses that you're talking about. There's many
Hmm.
equivalents of this, even in poker, but in other areas today, where people have these consensuses, but probably don't reference actual truths. Whereas
Hmm.
just Pio Solver and these solvers just like slice through that and just
Hmm.
get straight to the answers. I mean, it's also true in ICM from some of the things I've seen. I'm not really an expert in ICM at all, to be honest. But have you worked much with the ICM calculations and study much about that, especially in short deck and these other kinds of games? Um, Maybe PLO too. Your first bracelet was a PLO bracelet of all
My only
things.
bracelet, yeah.
Your only bracelet. That's so weird.
Hmm.
Um, Oh wait, well, it's your only bracelet. I presume you have like a bunch of other titles. I can't keep track of all the titles. How many Triton
Sure, yeah.
titles are we talking? Huh?
One Triton title. I have a lot of
Oh,
seconds and thirds.
oh shit. Well, you gotta get that
I gotta work on my
run
heads
good.
up game, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you got the money. The money is pretty good, from what I hear. Um, but yeah, how's your ICM study habits? Any revelations? Uh, any particularly striking discoveries?
Yeah, I mean, I use what's out there. I mean, the ICM stuff you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, right? Because it's an imperfect model. It's the best we have right now, and I think you can definitely get a lot of insights from it, and I definitely have. But at the end of the day, you still have to um, adjust for what you think the flaws in the model are gonna produce. So it's kind of I think this is why tournaments are kind of um, the last form of poker that's going to be solved, and like the probably like the healthiest form, because like to if you want to actually get the answer to a question about a tournament poker hand, you have to essentially simulate the whole rest of the tournament. Like the game tree would just be like astronomically big, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I use the tools that the best tools that we have right now, but I think they fall short of what we need to know actual answers in the same way that um, you know he'll solver or whatever other solver is solved like heads up cash, for example.
Um, yeah, I mean, that seems for sure true. I know it doesn't take into account like how stack sizes are affected in the future game trees. It doesn't take care. I forget what it's called. Future doesn't take care. It doesn't take into account future game possibilities. Um, I do want to mention a few nuances of ICM that people may that would be useful for the audience, such as, for example, like the difference between. I mean, I don't know what's obvious to you. Like, who knows? Like, I imagine you know your shit really well, but there's like quite some nuance in if you're the chip leader or the second chip leader, or if there's multiple short stacks. Especially like the final table, this can like drastically affect your play depending on your stack size and things like that. And even like the
Mm-hmm.
bubbles, like quite different from that. For example, I mean, one thing that's probably obvious to you is that the short stacks usually they're uh, they're way less likely to want to bust during closer to the bubble versus like a final table where the pay jumps are quite small
Of
because
course.
what's that?
Yep, yep.
Whereas I'm not sure if people like recognize like how big of a difference that can do it that can make, and also um, how wildly the preflop ranges can change because of that. Definitely, I made all kinds of mistakes that were related to cash games, like opening a bunch of stupid shit
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing. I think this is ICM 101. Um, how I'm trying to think of a good question to ask you to so that you could demonstrate a little bit of your insight into this. Like,
Oh yeah, I
um,
mean, I so one of the biggest kind of revelations from studying this stuff, which makes sense if you think about it, is all of this like three bet folding off of shallow stacks or four bet folding off of shallow stacks, things that you wouldn't do in a cash game because you're just getting the odds to call all in. But in a tournament, if you think about how your the value of your stack is mapped, each chip isn't worth the same amount, right? So your last few chips are worth the most, and then like each one you add is worth less and less and less. So say you were gonna um, four bet fold for half of your chips, for example, you would never do that in a cash game because you're getting 3 to 1 to call it off. You're always getting the right price. But in a tournament, because half of your chips aren't half of your EV in the tournament, they might be only like 20% of your EV in the tournament or whatever. Now you can do things like four bet fold half of your chips, and it still makes sense because it's not half of your value. Um, so like that was one thing that really stuck out when I first started looking at this stuff. Raise folding off of like nine big blinds or three bet folding off of you know 15 or whatever. Um, that kind of stuck out um, as something
oh, that's a good
that
one.
changes a lot with ICM.
That's a good one. One thing I learned relatively recently is someone can, based off the stack sizes, open a very wide range, but another player can shove profitably with can still it can be correct to open a really wide range like in a certain stage of the tournament and but another player can shove profitably if they know how wide you're opening and that if they don't know how wide that person's opening because of how unattractive it is to bust. But there's like it has to. There's quite some subtlety with what if like there's multiple short stacks and all of that. I have to think of the example, but there's this hand where this Brazilian player shoved over nine something like any two cards versus an open from one of the larger stacks of the table. And the Brazilian guy, I believe, did not cover the other guy. Did you see this hand by this? I believe by this Peter guy. These Brazilian guys actually have done some very smart things, to my knowledge, that were really really surprising. Um,
Hmm.
but it
I'm
seemed like
not
it
aware
didn't
of the
make
hand
sense.
that you're talking about exactly.
I
But
should. I didn't think of. I'd be talking about this, but I should have got the stack sizes. But it didn't make any fucking sense to me because it's like, why would you? At least at first, but it's like, why would you open a wide range and then the counter response is for the guy to shove? But an exploited response would have been, yeah, to shove all in. It's just the guy couldn't call because he puts like the middle guy puts a lot of pressure on the middle guy, and he has enough leverage to open wide versus the the last the player Peter who shoves like any two, but he just like almost can't call like an all in because of how many like short stacks are out there. But yeah,
mhm.
some really strange things happens once you start playing with the ICMs that are counterintuitive from cash perspectives, and it's something I need to study more actually.
Sure, and it's
But yeah.
so I think I that's what I love so much about tournaments is that it's so nuanced and it's so every situation's so unique. Like you tweak one stack size or you tweak the positions of where the big stack is, or you make small changes like what the payout structure is, whatever, and like everything changes. So um that keeps it like really fresh for me and really interesting as a game. I
Mhm.
still love studying it and thinking about it and playing it. Um,
Is there one
yeah.
particular hand that you've played that stands out? Well, one it doesn't have to be your favorite or whatever. That stands out where you did something very unusual due to ICM that you would never do in a cash game, and that was like a pretty big EV. Either was either big EV play, big EV difference between something else, or was just a hand that seems very unusual and that is like shocking in that kind of way to see.
Um, I guess one hand that uh, probably the biggest equity pot I've ever played, most likely, was four-handed in the Triton Million,
Mm-hmm.
and I it was four-handed. Bryn was chip leader. I was second in chips, and then there was Aaron Zhang, who was on the shorter side and playing very tight, and Dan Smith, who was I think third in chips and also playing tight, like playing well because you're supposed to be tight. I opened cutoff and Bryn shoved the big blind for like I think around 30 effective. Um, and so it's a situation where um, the solvers are going to tell you to call off very very tight, being second in chips and like risking busting before the other two. Um, I thought that um, the future game considerations were extreme in that situation because basically we were at kind of this tipping point where if Bryn got a few more chips, he was going to be able to just like completely dominate the table, play almost every hand. I was on his left, and like as second biggest stack, I couldn't really do anything about it. And then Aaron Zhang was the shortest stack, and I thought that he was playing too tight. So I thought that this situation was going to last like longer than it should, and that it would be really bad for me. Um, and whereas if I were to call and win, and double up into the chip lead, then it's kind of the same situation, but I'm in the driver's seat, right? So I'm the one who gets to like raise a lot of pots and kind of win more than I should. So I thought that it was a really extreme kind of future game situation. And I made like a quite a big deviation to call off pocket sevens
Hmm.
to try and basically gamble for the big stack and try and win the tournament. Uh, he had uh, he had King Jack off and didn't work out for me. It was probably the pot was probably worth like, I don't know, 10 million plus. Uh, and yeah, he won. I guess he shot the tournament and came second, and I came fourth. But I guess that would be an example of a big deviation I made in an ICM situation that might surprise some people, and something that still I don't know, like if it was too big of a deviation, if my reasoning was sound or not. I guess gotta wait until they develop some better tools to really know the answer.
Well, that one would be that one seems like a big deviation from ICM. It seemed that one's like more of the future game. That was a
Yeah,
good great
exactly.
hand
Yeah,
actually because it you just consider the future game considerations to matter like weight a lot that you could like go wider than quite a bit wider than ICM, right? I would think that's quite a bit wider. I would think sevens is yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I guess it's like 1 or 2 pips too loose, but
yeah.
I
At
don't think
least.
that. Oh, really? It's more than 2 pips loose.
Well, I mean, I think probably he shouldn't have a shoving range, so if we're kind of in fantasy land from the start, I think he should only be three betting smaller, and then depends what you want to how you want to range him, I guess. How heavily you want to put him on low pairs and ace-x suited type stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess if you set up the tree to where he had to shove some stuff, I expect it would be like tens or something.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's quite a big deviation for sure.
All right. I was thinking nines, but I don't know these things that well. And you forgot one very important consideration that is often overlooked.
What's that? Winning the tournament is pretty sweet.
Well, I didn't even think of that. That's actually important. But I personally would not have been particularly thrilled to sit at a table four-handed and have Bryn Kenny raise every hand, especially if he's like on an upswing or something like that. I mean, the pain of that is worth at least 1 pip in my opinion. Uh,
Gotta factor all these things in.
Speaking of which, do you think there's any room in high stakes tournaments for some kind of levity or some kind of how else do I put this? Not necessarily. Well, yeah, levity would be a requirement, but just some kind of aspect to make it more watchable for the audience that isn't a hardcore poker fan. I try to bring this to the games, although even in tournaments, I was thinking, man, like I feel bad if I'm gonna like do some kind of ridiculous antic and piss somebody off or talk some shit. I like just
Hmm.
didn't have the heart to do that. I could. It wouldn't be. I mean, it's kind of one of these high variance strategies from my point of view. But do you think it just has to be very stoic and very calculated, or is there a possibility? Is there a silver lining where things are more watchable to onlookers that don't know a thing about poker?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think um, probably tournament coverage should be edited, would be my suggestion. I mean, unless you're really into poker, like sitting there for 11 hours and watching every hand, like probably gets pretty tedious, regardless of how people are acting. Um, I think that there's a reason that people do tend to be quite stoic and serious in tournaments. The level of competition in these high rollers is quite high. You have a lot of rake to beat and a lot of expenses to overcome, and you're playing against, like, in many cases, some of the best players in the world with shot clocks for 12 plus hours at a time, many days in a row. It's it's really hard to do that and be kind of animated and entertaining, I guess, without giving stuff away. I think, um, and I think, in my opinion, there's room for some seriousness in tournament poker. I mean, if you are a casual poker observer, there's so many things you can watch where the person's like trying to entertain you first and play good poker second, right? There's like so
Mhm.
many streamers, so many like cash games with soft lineups. There's a lot of that content out there. There's not very much of just like, okay, these are the best players in the world playing for a ton of money and kind of with more of a lens of it being like a mind sport, like similar to chess, for example. I think, even if the viewing numbers for that form of format of poker aren't as good as like some of the more um, typically entertaining forms, like the big cash games with the big personalities or the streams or the streamers. Um, I th- I still think that there should be a place for um, just the best performers at the game of poker. Um,
Sure.
I think, yeah, probably editing could help with that. Um, if you want the game to be looser, like you can modify the structure of the game to make people play looser. You can have more antes, you can make it more top heavy. There's ways to do that, but uh, yeah, I think for good reason, most of the people playing the higher stakes tournaments are a lot more focused on trying to make good decisions and win money than
Yeah.
entertain the viewers.
Yeah. I do think that they actually. I think that thinking about it more, and as I was doing it, I was like, man, there's like no way that this would really that's really a possible outlet, particularly in that situation of tournament poker because the competition's so fierce.
Mhm.
So because you're just playing against too many of the best in the world, but that it occurred to me that in order to get more viewers, it seemed like there are only really two possible outlets, or to expand the game. Those games, the one you mentioned, which is create more antes or things like that. I mean, you can add many different variations to the tournament, but the competitive edge is always going to be there. I mean, that's one thing is you can spice things up in all those kinds of ways, like the way the coin ribbit tournaments kind of do. They do it a little bit, but they could do a lot more with it with the businessman invites a pro thing. I mean, I think way more potential for innovations like that can exist. I just don't know really why. Maybe because it's too out of the box. Why people are not really capitalizing that. And the second thing is, as you mentioned, actually, is edits in the direction of emphasizing the skill in some kind of way that's. It would be nice if it could be emphasized in some kind of way that's palatable. Whereas I think if
Mhm.
someone just like throws up a bunch of numbers on the screen, I mean that's just not going to appeal to like a very wide amount of people. But if
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know,
if you watch like esports, for example, like there's a lot of like player interviews. There's a lot of obviously you have some expert commentators who can kind of get into the minds of the players, but in poker there is a lot of information you just don't have. You don't know why someone's doing a certain thing. Um, so yeah, maybe if some of the more interesting hands can be edited, explained by like top professionals and or the people who played the hands themselves, like obviously like people aren't going to want to give away too much, but I think if it was kind of done in a way that appealed to a more casual viewer, that might be a way to kind of break up the monotony of the oh, here's another hand of poker, here's another hand of poker. Like yeah, I think there's things that could be done in those areas, but it's not obviously not my area of expertise.
it actually seems like something I should explore because I'm good at figuring out what people are thinking at a high level, and I might have the possibility of making it entertaining. Yeah, I can see many positives actually for me to look into this, and it also solves my problem of like I gotta know more about ICM. Yeah, maybe I'll look into it more. I want to talk more about the softer parts of the game and also about your new project, which we'll get to in a second. Or I don't know how new it is. Neuropeak Pro. I actually tried it a little bit myself, but we'll get to that in a second because it seems like you mentioned before that you have good posture while playing, and apparently you're notorious for some stare downs. I didn't know you're giving some fierce stare downs, some mean looks to people, and I know you. It sounds like you're really
Unintentional.
into, huh? Unintentional.
Unintentional. I'm not trying to
Oh,
look mean.
you
I'm
shouldn't have
just
said that.
intense.
You should have just said like, oh yeah, like these guys. It would have been funny if you said, oh yeah, these guys are just some chumps. And I'm just gonna eat them for breakfast or something. Um, Give like the Bryn Kenny speech about being the tiger or like some shit like that. I think that's what he would say. I think it's his lion poker tail or whatever. Uh, um, well, the like fiercer one that's more calm. Apparently, I would consider you fiercer than Bryn Kenny to his chagrin. Um, Calm fiercity, ferocity, something like that. Anyway, so um, let's see. So the live tells we got the posture, we got the breath work, the sleep. How important is all that stuff to you? How much do you personally value it, and what kind of difference do you think all that makes to your game? Oh, and do you perhaps also the gym and things like that?
So yeah, the soft skills I think are quite important, especially when you get to the highest levels. I'm pretty much always looking for any avenue to improve as a player, as a person. Um, I really enjoy the process of working on my weaknesses, trying to optimize everything. So, yeah, I pay a lot of attention to things like sleep, diet, all of that stuff. I wear a Whoop. I see you have one too.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, I do. Yeah,
so
I
yeah,
love
I
it.
pay a lot of attention to the things outside of poker. I wish that I had realized sooner how big of an impact physical exercise has on my mental health and performance. It's a huge one for me, definitely. It's difficult, I find, during like these intense poker stops when you're playing so many hours and just really trying to prioritize sleep to also get the exercise in. But I have worked on that more in recent years, and I've definitely seen a benefit.
Have you seen a benefit in terms of what kind of benefit are we talking? And what kind of, I want to ask, okay, what kind of benefit, what kind of exercises do you find the most useful? And also, are you able to see the results in some kind of like clear format of like do you see like what kind of difference it makes via the Whoop or how are you able to track the difference if at all?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely with the Whoop, like the heart rate variability stuff, like increasing that over time, which I think is considered to be one of the most useful metrics for indications of physical health.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I see definitely increases in heart rate variability, um, just better focus and kind of mental resilience, I guess, like the ability to deal with stress, stuff like that. Mostly, I don't really enjoy just like going to the gym, doing cardio. Like I don't mind lifting, but I much prefer doing activities. Um, I guess my I'm most passionate about rock climbing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I actually own a couple of gyms in France, rock climbing gyms, and I
Oh,
really
really?
enjoy that as both. It's quite a social activity. It's obviously very physical. You use your whole body, use your mind too to kind of to plan your way up routes and stuff. Yeah, I really enjoy climbing. I've gotten into tennis lately, which has been a big had a big impact on my cardio. I guess those are the main ones. And then like when I'm in Vegas, I have like a trainer and because I have a gym in my place and I lift when I'm in Vegas, but not as consistent with lifting when I'm on the road.
Well, lifting's pretty boring, to be fair. At least I think so. Yeah, the other things you mentioned sound like a lot more fun. I personally probably should try, especially rock climbing. I think tennis is a little tricky just because you need a partner to do tennis, so
Mm,
it's like a bit harder to coordinate, which is extra bandwidth. I was actually you answered like a different question, which is like, what are your hobbies? I had no idea you had a couple rock climbing gyms. That's pretty cool.
mm,
Who knew? Only Steven secrets. And My question was actually more along the lines of, let's say you're doing exercise X amount times a week. How does that translate to an edge in poker? Like, are there any kind of metrics to say? Does this mean you have like your focus is like 10% better? Or I don't even know how it would be assessed. I know like some rough metrics for how sleep affects things. For breathwork, I don't really know, but I would think I'm just trying to like bridge the gap between what are these things that are done and how what are like the tangible effects in terms of
mm,
like, do you know what I mean? In terms of put some numbers behind it, basically. Do you have any
mm.
idea of those, or it just kind of felt like a major difference? You think?
Yeah, it's tough to really kind of track focus. I do like have a kind of poker journal type thing where kind of score myself on a few different metrics, and I do that every break. I'll give myself like a how did I perform, how was my focus, stuff like that, and I'll write that down and see how it's impacted by like um, level of the day, like how long I've been playing, sleep stuff, and anything else. Um, I don't think I could put specific numbers like, oh, exercising twice a week makes me 15% more focused. Like I don't know how I would come to those numbers.
Well, I don't know how to
Um,
measure in terms of focus, but you could measure like energy output maybe, or like something like that, because that translates into focus. Because if you could somehow measure how much energy you have in the day, which for sure is affected by how much you work out, this would translate into a difference in focus.
mhm.
But I just don't know what
um,
that might look like.
yeah, I think for me it's more of a subjective thing. Like I know that I feel happier. I feel less affected by things like losing hands. I feel like I play better. Um, the I guess if you wanted to get into talking about the Neuropeak stuff,
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to
the
that.
the breathing belt has some um, metrics that kind of track some of this stuff in a pretty interesting way. Um, but yeah, if you want to start talking about that now.
Oh yeah, we can go to that. I want to mention that for me, the biggest thing that I've definitely noticed is difference in sleep. Nothing really affected my game nearly as much as difference in sleep. There's a couple of more things that have to do with me personally about how I'm different from
Hmm.
other people. The way my mind works is a bit different in that, but also it's a bit different. But that I think that I use less mental energy than other people once I'm used to something. But also, I found that playing like tons and tons of games as like trained my mind to be really resilient in playing with games. So that's like, you said you're a games player, and it's one thing that people can actually do to change a bit to get more exercise of sorts, mental exercise, and have more resilience to the tables is like basically play more and like put yourself in that mental duress of sorts, like literally mental workouts. But the sleep, statistically, there's a book called Why We I think it's Why We Sleep. It's a very important book. Um,
I've heard about the book, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's also for the audience. So that talks about all the different like how things are affected or what affects sleep and how important it is and all these kinds of things. Um, and it will even say like you can have a quite a the difference functionally of like even like 25% and just not even notice because your sleep sucks. And you won't notice as part of the thing. I will say I've noticed massive differences on that specifically, where it's obvious. I mean, like wild, careless mistakes. Um, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
probably the
that's
most
something
important.
that. Sorry, I was gonna say that's something that the Whoop kind of made me realize is how big of an impact that can have, and things that I wasn't really thinking about, like one glass of wine, for example, like how big of an impact that has on your sleep quality.
Oh, really? I thought one glass of wine
Mhm.
was healthy, actually.
I think that's a misconception.
Really?
I mean, I
Okay.
think it's going to have some benefits, but I don't think that they outweigh the cons.
Okay, that's interesting. I should look into that because one thing I've also recently read is about these areas called the blue zones, is which are these areas where people live the longest. There's a few surprises in that. This might be up your alley, but one thing is that they do have some casual drinks every now and then, which surprised me, specifically of wine. Wines, and also Tim Ferriss likes his glasses of wine. But that's yeah, for whatever reason, that was part of it. Some other interesting surprises are actually most of those societies are religious, and apparently, religion. There's quite a case to say that it's quite a good thing. I mean, I'm not gonna like sit here and preach to you guys. I'm just like I look at things both at like the logical and like the emotional side and try to find like where the truth's at. But that was one interesting. I mean, like in, I don't want to misquote it, but I remember like an 18% difference in lifespan or something. Um, there's quite some interesting studies on how religion affects society. That's another topic. Um, uh, I want to ask before we go on: have you dabbled much in spirituality? Is that up your alley? I know you're into the Wim Hof, and your Neuropeak Pro uses Wim Hof a lot.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that kind of thing. I think I'm a bit more drawn to some of the Eastern philosophies, Buddhism, and in particular, I guess. But yeah, I'm very interested by religion in general, how it shapes societies, what part it plays in, like how we've evolved and how we see the world and the impact. Definitely interested by that.
Okay, I did not know that. That's a bit of a surprise for me. For some reason, I didn't picture you as that kind of guy. Um, let's talk. Did you read this book called Breath by chance?
I don't think so, no.
Wow, you haven't read Breath. I can't believe it. You haven't read about the forgotten science. This seems like really up your alley. But yeah, it goes into all those sorts of topics. I mean, it's like perfect for this discussion. But there's some real surprises there, with like how breathwork affects like kind of can benefit athletic performance. It also talks about there's a one of the first civilizations in recorded history which is based in the Indus Valley, which is for people who don't know that is that's in India. Actually had like a statue depicting someone just doing breath work in there, so it was like a vital part in how, or at least in like health in India for a long time. There's loads of people in India that just leave it forever, and the main thing that they have in common is something in the breath, um, which is one of the reasons that I was convinced to do it. In addition, apparently there was a scientific experiment done in I believe the 1970s that book talks about where prana was actually proved. If you know what prana, or very strongly suggested, I should say, to exist. Prana is like life force energy, so what happened was there's this Swami, a legit like yogic dude who was potentially enlightened, came in and he they did something with measuring his weight or whatever it was, but they like it. it was strongly suggested that this like prana stuff actually had weight and that they could even measure it to an extent, which I thought was really crazy because this is prana is often talked about in these in Hindu texts. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't heard of that specifically. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, but prana is a very big thing in Hindu texts. It's basically just life force energy. It's basically just like
Hmm.
energy that gives you activity. And there's a lot of breath work in there that there's some science to it too, some neuroscience to it all, and I don't really understand it that well about all the weird exercises they do. And it seems like it. My understanding is it aligns a bit with Wim Hof method, but I don't know Wim Hof method
Oh,
that well. Um, but yeah, it goes into some of that stuff. Some of the breath work just is a branch of Kriya Yoga specifically, if you've heard of that. And yeah, that's stuff that's not quite in the woo woo category. It's more in the there's some science here kind of category, if you know where to look anyway. And yeah, there's some other studies about like how like other you know other tribes in the Americas that used breath work and it helped them to look better also and to have white teeth and to not get sick. Like these kinds of things are all in this book. It's pretty good. It was one of the better books I read for sure. Maybe one of the top
nice. I have
ten.
to check it out.
Yeah. So
The breath is certainly a
uh,
powerful tool.
yeah. So it seemed like up your alley, up the audience's alley. The theme of the podcast. So why don't you tell us a bit about this Neuropeak Pro thing? I even have the belt here. I tried it a little
Hmm.
bit actually today because I was like, all right, I need to figure this out now. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
so it's not like my company or anything. I started working with them in late 2020, so 3 years ago. I kind of stumbled across them through an interview that I saw with a golfer that was using them. Basically, they have biofeedback and neurofeedback equipment that you can train with to be able to have an influence over your stress response, anxiety, stuff like that. I think it's worth going into a little bit the kind of biology behind it, or physiology behind it. I think it's pretty interesting and kind of demonstrates how and why this stuff kind of works. So your autonomic nervous system, which is primarily things you, a part of your nervous system that you don't control, though we now are able to influence it in some ways. Things like your heart rate, just bodily processes, stuff like that. And it has two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And these are kind of in opposition. So the sympathetic nervous system is essentially a threat detection and response, um, has that function. Uh, so you've probably heard it described as the fight or flight response.
mhm.
And this gets triggered whenever we um, are in threat. Like whenever we perceive a threat, whether it's real or imagined. So it could be like, yes, we're in physical danger, and that's like kind of where it's primarily evolved in our brains. But it also could be like, um, I'm anxious about something and I'm creating that threat in my mind, and this is activating the system, which is telling me that I'm basically in danger. So the physiological responses to that are increased heart rate, typically faster breathing, shallower breathing, um, and in the brain, what's quite interesting is that um, people who are in this kind of fight or flight state, um, the brain activity shifts away from the prefrontal cortex and towards like the amygdala. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain kind of involved with some like higher order um,
The smart things.
functions. Yeah, so like things like forward planning, impulse control, logical reasoning, stuff like that. And then that kind of gets shut down when we're sympathetically oriented. And we use more of like the amygdala, which is like kind of emotional responses, right? Um, so you can see why you would want to uh, have these systems in balance. The other side of the spectrum is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is often called the rest and digest system. It's kind of a lot of digestion, just like it's activated when we're not under threat and when we are kind of our bodies are like repairing themselves, stuff like that. So like the vast majority of people are over sympathetic, like they're because the world we live in today, there's basically threats all around us, kind of. Even though we're not in physical danger, like you turn on the news, that's activating your sympathetic nervous system. You look
A
at
lot of different.
Twitter and see people that are disagreeing with you, whatever. Like there's all these stresses basically that are activating um, this branch of your nervous system, um, and it's causing kind of chronic stress, stuff like that. Um, so what the belt does to get to that, sorry if this is like too long-winded, but um,
No,
I
it's
don't
good
know if you know
explanation actually.
also your heart rate is never constant. So if you're even at rest, say your heart rate is 60 beats per minute, it's not going to be one every second. It's going to go, it's going to fluctuate up and down. And
Yeah.
this fluctuation is what heart rate variability is. The greater that fluctuation is between like the fast beats and slow beats, the more your body is kind of ready to respond to whatever it needs to, and also the more it's in sync with your breath, is a really good indicator of kind of bodily and mental readiness for whatever might occur. So what the belt does, you wear it and you find your resonant breathing pace, which for most people is around 6 breaths per minute. Um, and then you can see in real time it has heart rate monitors, and it's measuring your diaphragm, so how deeply you're breathing into your belly, basically, like yogic breathing. And you see in real time your heart rate as one line going up and down, and your breathing shown by your diaphragm, like the stretching of this band, also going up and down, and it gives you a kind of score for how coherent those two are. And what you notice is that over time they sync up. That's gonna like activate more of the prefrontal cortex and be beneficial for all kinds of things, reduced
Okay.
anxiety, increased focus, stuff like that.
All right. Yeah, that makes quite a bit of sense to me. I'm a bit more used to neurobiology, but for the audience, I'll summarize. But basically, there's different parts of your brain that are activated based on like your mind's conditioning towards stress, and it's not like very efficient with how like the modern world is run. The modern world kind of manipulates. Often, it does manipulate, in fact, the way your brain works to like kind of up. Um, I mean, it's not with exactly bad intentions all the time. But yeah, breathwork basically fixes all that by redirecting more blood to parts of your brain that the prefrontal cortex that matter and like regulating your breath so that your stress isn't your decisions. So this is a. It sounds like breathwork basically could be used to solve a lot of emotional sorts of problems such as tilt or winner's tilt, maybe even. I don't. I think that it helps, but it's like on the same kinds of lines of meditation. It sounds like where you have these problems and your mind is basically getting screwed up and you're not really 100% in control of yourself, and it seems like it fixes these kinds of things. um, I want to add that you kind of do allude to this solution that I think is really important for people to recognize, because a lot of times there's all these kind of problems that exist in the world, and there's this overarching theme of how people tend to deal with them a lot of time, which is basically yell and point and screech, like do better, in all kinds of different ways. And then it's kind of like when you're in the middle of a traffic jam and you're like yelling at the guy in front of you, do better, like why aren't you going faster? But if you actually look at what's in front of this guy and look at all the barriers that exist, it's like, oh, yeah, this guy's actually trying a pretty hard job. The problem isn't him. The problem is the whole system. It's the whole traffic system or whatever. It's like what can you actually do to solve that? Well, in this case, it'd be like whatever's going on in the mind to impede, various, or to create various emotional problems that might have worked, like 4,000 years ago, but no longer work very well in a weird modern society. Um,
Mm.
and I think it's just really important to recognize that the solution to these problems at scale is not to keep yelling, do better, why are you such an idiot? It actually creates more stress, in fact, but actually to undermine the mechanisms that exacerbate these problems. And so breathwork seems to be a very useful one for dealing with lots of these issues. And actually, talking to you, I'm thinking to myself, shit, I should do this more. I actually do a very brief pranayama every 3 to 4 hours, which is 4 second inhale, one nostril, hold for 16 seconds, exhale 8, and do that for the other way as well, and repeat for 3 to 5 times. I do it multiple times, and I found definitely that breathwork has that would be one of the factors in limiting my stress towards a lot of crazy responses. I mean, that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Another thing that I follow that might interest you, Stephen, is this guy Sri Ravi Shankar. I really like a lot of his stuff, even though he's kind of like a modern day Jesus in some ways, but like more an entrepreneurial type. Um, Many miracles around him allegedly, but he has this happiness program, which is supposed to do precisely a lot of what you're talking about, but in a few different. It's supposed to flatten, to basically, yeah, to flatten heart rate variability. I think is that the term, flatten?
So flattening would be a bad. You see also when you're stressed, when you're uh, sympathetically dominant, is you see a flattening of the heart rate. You see less swings, and you see the swings not corresponding to your breath at all. Um,
Oh, okay, okay, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, but yeah, this what you said about the heart rate variability makes quite a bit of sense. Consistency and what's the word? Harmony sounds
Coherence.
ideal. I want I want to throw out. By the way, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite. I haven't slept enough, but I also could not because I was up playing last night until 5 a.m. losing my ass. But I want to throw something else out here that I make no money from at all. But I have this energy drink thing that's got ashwagandha and all this stuff in there. I could swear I noticed a difference if I take ashwagandha and that kind of stuff too. But though caffeine also has, it's like a short term. It's got some caffeine in there, but it's a short term. Um, it's not really. Allegedly, it's got some problems as well. I don't know if there's any problems with ashwagandha and these other kind of supplements that help you to focus and this kind of stuff. But yeah, I thought I'd throw that one out there. While we're on the topic of health and optimizing health. So how did you actually get involved with Neuropeak Pro? Did you just like message them and they said, "Hey, yeah, why don't you
Yeah, so
promote this involved?"
they have a couple of different products. They have the belt, which is kind of the most accessible one, and then they have they also do neurofeedback work where you wear a headband that measures your brain waves level frequencies across different brain regions. Um, and after an initial evaluation and talking with like a qualified coach, um, you basically you train by watching videos or playing games. Specific brain regions, you train specific brain frequencies up or down. So if they've noticed that, okay, your brain has too much of these very high frequency waves, um, corresponds to kind of overthinking, anxiety, stuff like that. So they might um, set up the app to train those down. And then, for example, you're playing a game where you're like a runner, and like your guy will run faster when your brain is producing less of that frequency, and slower when it's producing more. And then just by watching this video and this guy like running faster and slower, you give your brain like this real time feedback, and it actually changes like what it's outputting. Um,
Really?
so yeah, I like I said, um, I read a bit about them after seeing them mentioned in an interview from a golfer, and just thought I'd give it a try. And to be honest, like I noticed bigger effects from this than probably anything else I've tried. Um,
The mental exercises.
I kind of did everything all at once. So it's the breathing, the neurofeedback stuff, and then the kind of there's also traditional talking to a coach who's talking to you about sleep and diet and all of that stuff, thought patterns. But like very soon after starting to work with them, I made big improvements in some things that I had been working on for a long time, without as much success. And
Oh, really?
yeah, just to the point where I messaged them and said like, hey, can I like represent you in some way, because I think it helped me so much, and I know like there's so many people out there in the poker world and just in the world in general who struggle with anxiety, um, depression, insomnia, like all of these things. Like if you don't know people struggling with these things, you probably don't know many people. That pretty prevalent in the world today. And I think that if this can be like a way to help people, like um, yeah, I really believe in um, the training that I've done, and would just want to kind of make people more aware of it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to try some of that neurofeedback stuff. I think maybe it could help me with diet things. I mean, the diet stuff probably does make a big impact in a lot of these areas as well. You reminded me of something else I was reading about, which is one of the reasons why I got into entertainment, by the way. But I was reading a very well-known book called The Psychology of Influence, or the Psychology of It's called Influence: Psychology of Persuasion by um, Doctor someone. His last name's Cialdini, but it's a very famous book. But they had various experiments where, well, first let me tell you the problem. Well, one example problem would be there'd be this kid who they're trying to teach them how to swim, and they're trying to like incentivize him, and they're trying all these different ways to try to get him to get over his fear of swimming. This little kid, and then nothing worked at all, and then later they found they just like kind of left this kid alone for a while, the parents or whoever, and then they saw later that he was able to swim, and they asked like, well, wait, what changed after like a few days or something, leaving him alone with some other kids at some research center, or not some research center, some like um, they left this kid alone with just other kids at some I don't know, some like group activity.
Hmm.
I don't know what it's called, but like they're just away for a week. And it turns out that basically his friends were swimming, and made it seem so easy. So this made him think, oh, like these people that are related to me, can do this so easily. Oh, it can't be so bad. And that was what actually got him to behave. And I realized that there's lots of parallels in entertainment that work in the same way, and that this is like a big way of how to inspire people. But anyway, the neurofeedback stuff that you mentioned reminded me of this because this apparently is a really effective way in dealing with various different kinds of stressful emotional problems and I mean, another parallel would be like trying to get a kid to go to the dentist, or I can think of one in my life when I was scuba diving and there's a million jellyfish around when I like plunge into the water, and like one of the instructors just kind of pushes one away, and I thought, oh, okay, these jellyfish are not so scary anymore. But yeah, I'm really intrigued to try this neurofeedback stuff and see if it's quite useful for some some things. You've actually inspired me to do more of this stuff.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. I hope that you can get some of the same benefits that I have because, yeah, like I said, it made a big difference for me.
Do you want to tell us what benefits they made for you?
Yeah, so I guess I was drawn to it from kind of a performance, like poker performance side of things. Like that was my motivation to do it, like be better at poker. But I actually noticed like more impact immediately, like away from the table, and especially with something that I struggled with for basically my whole career was like um, beating myself up about mistakes, like being very self-critical and like detaching
Mm.
from the game. Like once I finished playing, like very frequently I would just like lose a tournament. It'd be especially bad if I like felt like I played a hand bad to bust or whatever. Quite often like I would just be that would be going around in my head like unhelpful thought loops about that hand, just repeating for hours and hours, and like couldn't detach from it. Couldn't like be present with anything else that was going on, kind of thing. And that like I won't say disappeared completely, but I've made like such huge improvements in that area. Like from very quickly after, I was just able to kind of, I think, from like changing some of the thought patterns around it. And then I assume the neurofeedback stuff helped with this too, and breathing. I was quickly able to get to a place where I could like have a bad day doing my job and then go and be happy and present with my family, which like that was just huge for me.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like quite a huge deal. I think a lot of people struggle with that. I would like to get better at it. Like, I'm not perfect at stuff like that myself. Oh, shit. Um, awesome. I want to ask you. We're running out of time. I'm actually late for something, but I want to ask you a couple more questions. Let's see if that might take you off guard. Let's see if we can handle them. So, what do you think people often get wrong about, misunderstand about you, if anything?
um, Probably that I'm mean or too serious. I think.
They think you're mean. What the
I
fuck?
mean, I don't talk very much at the poker table. I have like have had throughout my life like pretty intense social anxiety, and it leads me to like be not very kind of engaging in social situations. So I think I probably come off like cold or unfriendly to people, especially with my like staring or whatever. Um, but yeah, I think I would say that's what I would expect people to get wrong about me. I think
All
that
right,
I'm
guys. Steven's
pretty
not a
friendly
mean
guy.
guy. Probably friendlier than me, actually. I'm not always friendly. Sometimes I'm grumpy as but I'm not. People think I'm mean sometimes too. No, not mean unless people act like idiots. But other than that, All right, now the world should know. All right, one last question. What's a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
A lesson that took me a long time to learn. I guess I mentioned it earlier, but like I guess just the role that things like exercise have, like how big of an impact they have on just mental health and stuff. I had like quite a lot of mental health issues in like my early 20s. And like the doctors came to it from like a okay, just try these drugs, and if they don't work, try these other drugs or whatever. And like
Oh shit.
I didn't real like I wish someone had told me earlier, like, hey, like pay attention to how you feel when you do exercise. Pay attention to how you feel when you eat this food instead of this food. Like being more, I think probably like meditation played a big part in that, like being more mindful of like what effects different things have on me. And like, yeah, how big of an impact like just exercise, like simple things can have on my mental health, I guess.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's it doesn't the feedback loop for exercising probably is not immediate also. It's probably one of those things that takes a minute to kick in. You have to like associate, okay, like made these changes and now I've got all this going on. Would you say that was accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly for like intense exercise that you get from like tennis or basketball or like anything where you're hitting like a really high heart rate, I think is just going to give you like a huge endorphin um, rush that's going to make you feel good pretty much regardless. But yeah, like a lot of the other auxiliary benefits, like the just feeling better in your body and stuff, like obviously it takes time for your body to adapt to things, and initially it can be challenging or painful to start working out, start a new thing, like you're going to get sore, you're going to
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah, takes a bit of time in that respect.
Well, that's definitely true too. I mean, just jumping into it doesn't usually work. I've had many. Yeah, I mean, I find, and I think the general advice with that is to start small. Even like starting a workout, to like get you in a mood to really want to finish it. Yeah, to this day, I hate working out a lot of the time, but it's not got some kind of not boring attributes to it. Um, but
Well, I'd love to take you climbing if we ever, if you we're in Vegas or whatever. I climb a lot in Vegas, so you'll have to try it out.
all right, sure. I will. I would love to go rock climbing with you.
Great.
Thank you for the offer, and yeah, I'm open to
Hmm.
that. But anyway, Stephen, it's been great having you on the show, and appreciate all your insights and all your great successes. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck. Do you want to mention anything else before you go?
No, just thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and yeah, I hope the viewers enjoyed.